Hi everyone, Bernard here. I hope you're all staying safe and well, and welcome to the Citizen channel. And a City Pass today, yes, a good title, a fantastic title. It'll mean a lot to many City fans. It should be etched in your minds, even you young ones out there. Yeah, it's got to be titled 84,569. Yes, a figure that should be etched in your memory of every City fan. It's my sort of go-to number, and a lot of City fans' go-to number whenever we hear the no fans jibe, etc., etc. And of course, it remains a crowd figure now that graced wonderful Maine Road. And now, as I'm recording this, 87 years later after the event, still remains a record crowd. You can forget your Tottenham getting a little bit better at Wembley for a league game. That doesn't count, does it? Outside of Wembley, it still remains the highest crowd ever at an English football match for an English domestic game not played at Wembley. And still something to be proud of. But interestingly enough, I mean, what I want to look at today is why did so many souls crowd into Maine Road that day? Was it an anomaly? Was it something odd? What such a strange figure compared to other crowds, etc., etc. So, was it the time? Was it the year? Was it something significant in that? So we're going to have a quick look through what was happening in football at that time and try and explain a little bit of this 84,569 figure, and perhaps why it came about, and perhaps why it wasn't a regular thing. Let's be honest about it, it certainly wasn't. So please, we're going to have a look at that today, have a bit of fun, have a bit of information for you on that. Please, if you're new to the channel, push that subscribe button, push the bell notifications, so you know these city vlogs are coming out. Do past and present, of course, and of course you'll see some film and TV channel stuff on my playlist as well. So if you want to have a break from football, please check that out. That'd be fantastic. There's links on screen for Facebook and Twitter, so if you follow or friend me on there, I do check every couple of days and follow and friend everyone back on there as well. So if you do that, that'd be fantastic. Please, all your comments, anything to do with Maine Road. And we've got some great memories, haven't we? Obviously, there won't be many people about who have many memories of this. Obviously, now it's, but you may have been told from grandparents and stuff like that who actually went to the game and stuff. I mean, there's a piece on there. There's a piece in this little feature there under Maine Road that of a guy whose uncle was at the match and could tell him about things and stuff like that. So leave us your comments anyway. That'd be fantastic. Please, if you can't give us a comment today, just give us a thumbs up. Yeah, I mean, we have to go back, don't we? We have to go back to City in the 1900s. I mean, the men in suits, if you like, the men in suits had realised there's a bit of potential with City for the future. Obviously, we were at Hyde Road. We got some big crowds there. A lot of time we sort of packed Hyde Road out. You know, we needed somewhere a little bit bigger. And before the First World War had broke out, we'd laid a foundation for a stadium with a capacity of about 120,000. 120,000, why not? I mean, initial plans were put together based on a design of Hampden Park, of course, which held those sort of figures. So this apparent small club at the turn of the 19th into the 20th century had very high ambitions, obviously, and that's also another thing I quote to away fans, that this small club back in the 1900s had plans for 120,000 stadium, and that small club, as we'll talk about in a minute, all right, it didn't end up as that amount, but we built a flipping big ground. So you know that was certainly high ambition for a very small club. No other small club would think that big. Let's be honest about it. As World War One tempered the dream and the ambition, of course, but City did seek out a plot of land capable of building a massive stage, and if it meant upsetting, sadly, the fan base in and around Ardwick and Bellevue, obviously around Hyde Road, then so be it. That's what they had to do. A redesign, obviously, after all, brought the capacity down to about 80,000, anywhere between 80 and 88,000. But when it opened, it was hoped that the total would be near that 88,000. It could be extended again. There was vision of that even at that stage, even after the First World War. But this was never really tested, this 88,000 capacity anyway. But yeah, even for the 84,569, it wasn't really tested. But we'll have a little bit more on that in a few moments. Construction was started on Maine Road at the end of 1922 on a site in Moss Side, of course, and took approximately 300 days. The fans based around East Manchester were not overly happy, of course, as you wouldn't be. You know, they would have to get the bus, they'd have to get a tram, wouldn't they, to the games. But yeah, with this South Manchester construction. But in all fairness, City did try to stay in East Manchester, but logistically it just wasn't feasible. It just wasn't doable, unfortunately. So the dreams of another Hampden Park were dashed. It wasn't going to be 120,000. And we had to settle for building a Wembley of the North, it was called. And yeah, both stadiums, obviously Wembley was being constructed at a similar time as well, and both stadiums were actually more or less built within the same time scale, and Sir Robert McAlpine builders were constructed both. I think there's a north and south division. Obviously the northern guys were doing ours and the southern ones were doing theirs. So the gypsies were kicked off the land, allegedly. We're never ever sure of that. And the Maine Road was finally opened to its first competitive game on the 25th of August 1923, a 2-1 win against Sheffield United. Yeah, they'll come back into it in a little while as well. In front of it, not too shabby, all right. A bit down on capacity, but not too shabby. 58,159, which was the largest crowd outside of obviously Crystal Palace. I think it was slightly higher, wasn't it, for the FA Cup final? But it was obviously the largest crowd to watch Manchester City at home, of course, after Hyde Road's limitations. To quote a well-known favourite film, or a line in a favourite film of mine, build it and they will come. Well, it didn't exactly go to plan. That was by far City's biggest crowd of that season, of the 23-24 season. We did manage a couple of 40,000 crowds, but here's where things get just a little bit strange. I mean, I don't know about you, for me, the FA Cup as a kid, the FA Cup was just as big, just if not bigger to me than winning the league. I know that sounds silly now, doesn't it? But and I think it go back into the 20s, and it was a similar sort of thing. I mean, it was glorious. It was glorious to win the FA Cup. It was a knockout. It was a one-off thing when you played the games. You know, winner takes all. It might go to a replay, but that's what made it so special. And actually, Maine Road would see some, even though it's sort of swapped over the years, when you think about the older Maine Road before it was demolished, I mean, obviously, we struggled sometimes with FA Cup crowds. We've got far bigger league crowds, etc. But yeah, Maine Road will see some of the largest attendances in the FA Cups. The run to the semi-final in 1923-24 season, Maine Road had a crowd of 76,166, which was the record then for a fourth round game against Cardiff City. There was plenty of Cardiff City fans there that day as well. Indeed, Maine Road were going to amass 16 crowds for City games, all over 70,000, and 10 of those were for FA Cup games. So I mean, a high proportion. Hyde Road, the biggest gates had been normally against United, of course, on Newton Heath at the time. They didn't change names till a lot later. But this wasn't always the case at Maine Road. Only 4 of those 70,000 plus crowds were games against United, so it spread around a bit. But as can be seen, it was a bit of a one-off. Well, unless the need for a replay games that would attract the fans to these games. I think the power of the FA Cup and knowing it was winner take all, as I said, was probably what attracted the bigger crowds. But why would that game? Why would that specific game? Obviously, we talked about the 1924 game there against Cardiff City, 76,000. But why would that game against Stoke in 1934, a quarter-final, fair enough. Well, why would that test Maine Road's capacity for the very first time since it was constructed? Well, it was probably the perfect storm when you think about it. I mean, football attendances everywhere were increasing in the 30s. Most clubs were getting really high figures. Most clubs were getting record attendances. I mean, some had 1 or 2 when they played City, etc. City had their biggest crowds and our biggest crowds in the 30s. And City in 3 seasons found their entertaining quality side do okay in the league, but all seem to rise to the occasion in the FA Cup. So over the 3 seasons, the 30-31 season, it ended in the semi-final, unfortunately, but the 31-32 season, we went one better and got to the final, but unfortunately lost that. So by 1933-34, by the time of this game, a year we were finally to win the FA Cup, of course. It was on. Obviously, it was. We would be going to the other McAlpine built stadium for the final, but City had drawn Stoke in the quarter final on the 3rd of March 1934. So the City fans were a bit up for this one. It brought a crowd, of course, that surpassed Manchester's previous best. That I already mentioned, one against Cardiff City in 1924. And the crowd reflected just the popularity of football in the FA Cup at the time. I mean, we had a City team packed with legendary names like Swift, Busby, Tilson, Cowan. City fans, as I said, were obsessed now by winning the cup after coming so close after a semi-final, then losing a final, and now this is a chance to get to another final. So City fans had become an obsession with them to actually win this. Indeed, in the previous round against Sheffield Wednesday, thousands of City fans had travelled over to Hillsborough for the 5th round, and a crowd of 72,841, which became Sheffield Wednesday's highest ever crowd, actually went to that one. And the replay at Maine Road, it went to a replay in the midweek afterwards, attracted an unprecedented 68,614, which was unheard of for a night game, for a replay. You just didn't get those sort of crowds in the week. You know, you got them at weekends, but you didn't get them in the week. So add to this obsession. I mean, what about the neutral fan? I mean, let's face it, don't forget, a lot of fans watched City and United in those days. If City were at home, they'd watch City. If United were at home, there wasn't the allegiance there is now. So you had this sort of neutral fan, if you like, who would actually come to this. And that only sort of started to change later in the 50s and 60s, where obviously you became more allegiance to your club. But yeah, the neutral fans, Stoke were doing very, very well. Stoke had been promoted the season before. Also had an entertaining side. We mentioned some of the City legends there. And of course, Stoke had a 19-year-old, not a legend then, but he soon would be a legend, Stanley Matthews in their ranks as well. But they did have an entertaining team. Not to mention the thousands of Stoke fans that would have made the relatively short trip up from the Potteries, of course. And if you look at the Stoke press at the time, the Stoke papers, they claim up to 25,000 had made that trip. Whether that was believable or not, there's certainly a lot there. There's certainly thousands and thousands of Stoke fans there. No one can be absolutely sure, and we can't always believe what the Stoke media tell us, which we'll talk about in a moment as well. Yeah, in the games obviously in the days when games were not all ticket, it was important to get to the ground early. Even when I started going in the mid-60s, we used to be there waiting for the turnstiles to open. All right, we didn't get 80,000 crowds, obviously, but me and my dad would always go early, be first in, because it was pay at the gate. You just wanted to make sure you got in, and that was throughout the 60s and 70s that I was going, where it wasn't all ticket. You know, we did the same thing. We got there early if it was pay at the gate. 4 hours before kickoff in this game, large queues for the first time. They'd never seen it. No one had seen the sort of queues that were forming at Maine Road. And for the first time in Maine Road's history, the gates were actually closed 20 minutes before kickoff. Thousands were locked out. Imagine what crowd it could have been. There was thousands locked out of the game. City management claimed they'd been forced to by the police. But, I mean, it was absolutely shocking. We'll talk about a couple of eyewitnesses in a minute and things that happened. But yeah, they were forced to lock the gates, obviously, and the management were distressed because there were still 3,000 or 4,000 short of what they thought the capacity would have been at around 88,000. But it was probably wise. I mean, obviously this huge crowd did bring quite a few problems. At one point, a crush barrier, they used to call them in the days, or a crash barrier, but they used to call them a crush barrier, collapsed, causing a few injuries. Fans were also sitting on the touchline. That Sheffield Wednesday game I mentioned in the previous round, I think a gentleman had died in the massive crowd, had been taken out round the pitch. Unfortunately, passed away in the crowd whatever reason with the crush, etc., and the size of the crowd. So yeah, there've been a few injuries at Maine Road on this day, and the crowds were sitting on the touchline. Obviously Frank Swift used to chat to the crowd anyway, but obviously he found all the fans literally next to him for this game. There's some images, there might be an image on screen of how close the crowd got to the touchline as well. Very grainy images, but you can get the feel for it. I mean, with the terraces so packed, obviously you weren't on a step each, obviously. So I mean, they weren't the most sort of deep steps anyway at Maine Road in those days, in the old days. So you get a lot of people who were packed in, they couldn't see what was going on depending where you were. And the Guardian reported that one section of the ground where people couldn't see, that a person at the front began to describe the game for them as an unofficial commentator, and obviously it got all quiet around him as people listened out to what he was saying, because they couldn't actually see what was going on the pitch. And so several hundred people who might have had a bit of trouble and caused more trouble trying to get to watch the game, were actually happy just to stand and listen to this guy telling them what was happening while the game was being played. The only interruptions, or there were interruptions for the game, were men, and he said men here rather than fans. So obviously you were talking pretty much dominant male sort of turnout for this. Men had fainted, and there were scores and scores of men apparently in the corner of the ground alone were passed roughly but efficiently over the heads of the crowd to the grass on the front of the pitch, where the ambulance squads laid them out, and obviously in those days just splashed water on the faces to revive them. Fortunately, there was no serious injuries fortunately during this game, but that's how packed it was. And so the largest paying audience of all time in the provinces outside of Wembley had witnessed a tense game indeed. Hulston was a young City fan at the time, was 17, recorded the only goal of the game. Yeah, it was a lovely warm day. It would have been very warm in there. And Eric Brooks' goal came from an area I stood along the terracing from the Platt Lane corner. And his superb shot from the wing beat the Stoke keeper and nestled into the top corner. I'll speak about that in a moment. I think Brook played in every position for the club, he said. He certainly went in goal once and was a very good player. When the goal went in, it was marvellous. It was absolute nirvana. Many of fans, of course, from the 1930s claimed it was the greatest City goal ever scored at Maine Road. So it seems fitting that the famous old stadium's record crowd should have witnessed this, to be honest with you. But interestingly enough, we'll get back to the Stoke media. Their match report in the local Stoke paper claimed it had been a cross from Brook that the goalie had lost sight of and ended up in the net. So obviously their thoughts on whether it was the most magnificent goal ever obviously didn't correlate with what the City press or the Manchester press was saying, so, and the fans were saying, of course. So there you go. The young man Hulston went on to say, at the end I didn't need to use my feet to leave. I was wedged in a solid wall of human flesh and swept through the exit gate like a surfboarder. There you go. But I tell you what, I remember 3, 4, 5 games at Maine Road where my feet didn't touch the ground when I was a young lad. I can still remember that. So there you go, 84,569. The gate received a massive £5,426. There you go, take that to the bank. And of course, the state, we did want to lift the trophy that year, but I think this game was perhaps more memorable for many people. It's more so. I mean, we do talk about the wonderful victory, of course, in 1934, but I think the 84,569 at Maine Road that day has sort of lived in memory a little bit longer, a little bit better known, isn't it, than the actual Wembley win itself. Of course, Maine Road never got near that again to that supposed 88k capacity or anywhere near the 84,000. There were plenty of 70,000 crowds, not just for City games, but obviously there's many neutral games as well. And yeah, we did get 80k plus crowds, but not for City. No, we didn't get them in the 40s. Obviously, after Old Trafford was being reconstructed, of course, they played at Maine Road, and 3 United games were played in front of 80,000 plus crowds. Obviously part of their history, not ours, but it's still our Main Road, wasn't it? And a semi-final between Birmingham and Derby County attracted over 80,000 in 1946. I mean, this actually in the 40s, these large crowds at Maine Road, as I said, that a lot of the fans would have been City fans. Let's be honest about it, because obviously, as I said, there wasn't that allegiance then. But the problem was United had a much better team after the war, so obviously a lot of those fans sort of deserted City a little bit, because United had a great team. So once Old Trafford opened up again, obviously it's sort of common knowledge that a lot of those fans who had perhaps been City fans before the war actually deserted over to Old Trafford on a more regular basis than they did to Maine Road. So once again, City doing the right thing, and obviously charged them a reasonable rate for the ground, etc., and share of gate receipts, backfired on us. So typical City, we shot ourselves in the foot again. But hey, that's another story, isn't it? As a footnote, yeah, City's next home game, a 4-1 win against Sheffield United. There you go, we mentioned them early on, didn't we? The very first game we played at Maine Road. A 4-1 win was the next home game at Maine Road. I had a massive crowd of, yes, 13,000, that's 13,908 rattling around the old ground. So there you go. Certainly 70,000 plus short of the attenders. All right, we didn't have 25,000 supposed Stoke fans, but yeah, that was a bit of a drop, wasn't it? 13,908 rattling around the ground. Perhaps the fans hadn't recovered from the stress of that aforementioned cup game and being part of that wonderful record crowd that, as I'm recording this, still stands to this day. But there you go, typical City fans, eh? We're never happy, are we? Let's be honest about it. Anyway, thanks for joining me. Whatever you're going to do this day, have a great one. Look after yourselves, look after your friends, look after your families. More important, let's all look after each other. So we meet here again on the Citizen channel, or perhaps have a look at my film and TV channel. I only ask you to do one thing: stay safe, Blues. Come on, City. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.